Good evening, everyone. Welcome to GM Chat with Mike and Jeff. You can see the names on the screen, so you know who we are.
Yes. This is me.
Yes. And this is also me. So that's going to get confusing. We should probably go by names.
Very well, very
Yep.
well.
But yeah. So hope you've had a good week. We've had a good week here on the Artifacts Worldwide channel. Pretty much everything has gone well, except for that stupid mage trial mission in WoW on Sunday. Oh, was that a royal pain in the ass?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of like, wow, this is really stupid. Whoever wrote this should be fired.
Yes.
And Nikki was checking comments online, and pretty much everybody agreed.
It's a, yep.
Yep, they hated it. But
Consent.
tonight, we're not going to talk about that. We kind of are. Because what we're going to talk about is sort of the art of designing the good adventure, or the good module even, or the good dungeon. And that, that adventure in WoW is an example of a poorly written adventure.
Yes.
So, but we're going to talk about...
referred to in game design as level designers.
Yes. Yep, that was kind of atrocious. So we're going to talk about writing your own adventure and the things that we put into it, and kind of there's going to be a little bit of confessional element to this as well, because we're also going to talk about, we're going to fess up of what we do well but what we don't do so well. Because, they're one big thing for me that I always screw up, and I've been writing my own adventures for, 25 years? And maybe longer than that, and I still screw this one thing up, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Start off just by, what's your process? Like, if you sit down to write something new, what's your process?
Let me explain what it is currently. It has evolved over the years.
Yeah, mine has too.
Currently, my process is simply broad brush what's happening in the world that may or may not have any impact on the players immediately. At the point in time that the adventure is going to take place.
Right.
Then localize it. Okay, so they're going to, the players are going to be in this city, and they're going to be looking for something new to do. So what I'll do is I will basically write down a brief synopsis, kind of like, you remember when you used to read the little thing on movie descriptions?
Yeah.
In the little pamphlets they used to have back in the day, this movie and this is what it's about, and it's like a 1 or 2 sentence. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, it's in copywriting we call that an elevator pitch.
Yes, exactly. And then in that little blurb, I'll put the major NPCs they may encounter or may speak to that will point them in the right direction. And I'll come up with 3 or 4 of these that they can encounter in the city. And then depending on what route they take, and I let them go whichever way they want to go at that point.
Right.
And I pretty much have the bases covered. If they just want to hang out in the city and, look for equipment and, all that kind of stuff and just hang out, sightsee, whatever, that's fine. You don't need to write out a thing for that. But have somewhere at each point where they are in the city where they'll run into one or a couple of those things, and then send them on their way. Stocking the adventure after that is pretty easy. You got random encounters. Okay, if they go into the caves, they're probably going to run into gnolls or bugbears, or there might be something in there like that. Whatever. But have the plot basic, and so you kind of know what direction it's going to go in, and that's pretty much all I do, honestly. I don't much write out or plot out lengthy adventures that has that nice little railroad attached to it, where they got to go this way and follow this all to get through this and then out the other side, which is more module-like. But I try to keep it open so the players have some kind of control over their destiny. Can't think of the word on the top of my head right now. Agency.
Yeah.
That's it. So, what about you?
Well, it used to, back when I was first doing it, just like world creation, it would start with the map.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say, okay, the clues that they have, that they've chosen to follow, are leading them in this direction, which is ultimately going to result in them finding this particular location. And then I would draw the map.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would set about trying to justify every room I had drawn on the map. And that got to be a little bit of a pain, because I would end up drawing these elaborate maps and then realize that I had no clue what was going to be in, like 3/4 of these rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I just end up, stocking it with filler. But
Right.
this is also when I was writing for 2nd edition and 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. So if you
Right,
stock
right.
it with filler, big deal. It's just, more stuff they can fight and more loot that they can get. And writing stuff
Right.
for 5th edition is a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to recognize, like we talked about last week, that you can't just do your traditional 3rd edition dungeon crawl
Right.
with the way 5th
Kick in the
edition
door,
works.
kill the bad guys, loot, repeat.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have encounters, but you can't have, like, machine gun encounters.
Mm-mm.
Because unless they're really, really high level, they just don't have the spare power to throw around. After a couple
Right.
fights, they're out.
Yep.
So
Especially at lower levels.
yeah. So I've written one sort of traditional dungeon in the prep that I've been doing for a Cathan. That's down the road a ways from where you all are at, if you choose to go that direction.
Right.
But it was interesting because it used to be a functioning complex, and it had a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time I kind of roughed out, okay, what would they have, and who would have what in this particular complex, and what would be where, and, what kind of weird shit would there be, because this complex, even when it was functioning, was a little out there.
Right.
And with that in mind, then I designed the map.
Right.
And so this time, when I went to fill it out, I was kind of like, oh, okay, so this is this, and this is this, and this is this. And I think I had like 2 rooms
Yep.
left that I was like, okay, well, this, one of them I was like, oh, well, I was going to make this 2 rooms. I'll just include that one and make it 3 rooms. And that's that particular part of the complex. And the
Yep.
other room, I decided to throw something very weird and unique in, just for shits and giggles. And because it matches with the theme of this place.
Right.
And,
Now, one thing I'll try to do when I'm coming up with those little plot ideas is each one of those will tie into the bigger picture some kind of way.
right, right,
Depending on the outcome, there's 3 possible outcomes. The players win and kill the bad guys. The players lose and TPK, which means it doesn't matter at that point anyway.
right.
Or 3, the players stalemate or retreat. So what happens in that eventuality with each of those plots? Because it will in some way affect something that's going on in the greater world, in the bigger picture. That way they realize down the line, they come to a point and they're like, oh crap, you remember when we did that back there? This is what happened when we did that? So
Right.
they feel like the players are pertinent to the world setting, I think that's an important thing to remember when you're building an adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The players are the hero of the story,
Right.
and what they do should matter, and what they don't do should matter.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm realizing doing the prep for a Cathan is that not this is another one of those happy coincidences. I didn't think about this ahead of time. It's just now that I'm to the point where I'm looking at it and kind of going, oh, I've actually set myself up pretty well for writing adventure hooks that continue the current storyline, but also with the possibility of adventure hooks that investigate the past.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've mentioned on this show, but I got a little concerned one day, probably needlessly, but a little concerned that, I was looking at the map of a Cathan that I'd drawn and kind of going, wow, it seems small now.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a second map that if you go west from the current map, there's a whole other map of stuff that I have now set up.
Sure. That's interesting. It's kind of what Matt Mercer had to do. He their whole first campaign involved that continent and everything that was going on over there. Well, when he started the second campaign, he literally made Wildmount, the other continent, separate in another part of the world.
See, I wondered about that because I haven't watched any of the first campaign yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, no frame of reference. As far as I know, Zadash and Wrexhamtrim and Zorhas and all those, the Menagerie Coast, that's the world to me.
Yeah,
so.
and it's not at all. There's a whole other continent where the first campaign took place. Whitestone and all those other places over there are just as rich, if not more so, in culture than Wildmount is. So it's pretty cool, and maybe that's something when we eventually do a second campaign, we can start in another continent on your world.
Yeah. Well, I already know that there is a second continent because the edge of it is on the original map. And that's the land that's controlled by the orcs and the dragons.
Gotcha.
And that's the tip of a whole other continent in this world.
Sure.
So I just haven't done anything with it yet you know, I imagine at some point, way down the line, there's actually going to be a point where the Acathan folks decide to take the war to the orcs and the dragons.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So at that point, if and when we get there, then I'll worry about fleshing that continent out.
Right. So, what about stocking adventures? I know, you have an idea of how the adventure is going to be and how it's going to look, but the weird stuff like you're talking about.
Yeah.
How do you come up? I mean, what do you do to, is that just something you crap in the toilet, or is it something you've mapped out for years, or what I mean?
It kind of depends on what I'm writing. The one that I was talking about for Acathan, it actually has a specific place in the now mostly forgotten history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the group's first real encounter with something pre-shattering.
Right.
And looking at that, I just said, okay, so this is the condition that this area is in. This is what it was when it was functioning. This is what it's become. So what things that could conceivably be encountered now are going to be in there, but they're going to be different than they are now.
Yep.
A lot of the stuff that I wrote for that is it's unique and it's tied specifically to that location.
Right.
You won't find these particular opponents anywhere else in the world.
Right.
They just exist there because of that location, what it is, and what happened to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of the things that I've gotten fairly good at, and kind of like by necessity, is coming up with stuff that appears to be something that people recognize and then turns out not to be, or turns out to be different than what they expect, because I have been playing with experienced gamers for quite a while now, and
Right.
you get to the point where you describe the creature and somebody goes, "Oh, it's a basilisk. Don't look at its eyes, you'll turn to stone."
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Really? Your
Yeah,
characters have never encountered one of these before, so shut the hell up.
I really try to keep that to myself when I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is,
Yep.
and I just sit here and be quiet. What was it we fought recently that I did that? And I can't remember now. We fought something recently, and I did that, and I was like, okay, I know what this is. I'm not gonna say anything because
Right.
but how there's another thing you have to contend with now, because I use D&D Beyond for everything.
Right.
Well, so do my players, and I have one that likes to, while they're encountering something, they'll look it up on the monster manual in D&D Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
We had that happen the other day. They fought. I had 4 9th level players, characters, threw them up against an adult white dragon.
Okay.
And when we got things started, immediately the player is like, well, a dragon isn't immune to that. or a dragon isn't resistant to that. I said, yes, not the one in the book you're looking at, but mine on this world are a lot nastier than that.
Uh-huh.
I have amped them up, and he was too. Um, had they not prepared, they were smart. They prepared, and each got potions of cold resistance.
Yeah.
Had they not done that, it would have been a TPK.
Oh.
As
okay.
it was, I dropped 2 of the 4 players. Yeah, took them out.
Dead or unconscious?
Well, unconscious.
Okay.
But yeah, took them out of the fight. And the others were beaten up pretty bad.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
If you're fighting something that nasty, you're not going to get out of it unscathed. If you are, something's wrong.
Yes, exactly. And, so it turned out exactly how I kind of hoped it would. They got beat up pretty bad. They won, but they got beat up pretty bad. Now, you know me, and you know my kind of sense of humor, which tends to be, for those of you who don't know out there, my sense of humor as a game master is ironic, sardonic, and a little cruel.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah. So they were like, yes, they finally dropped the dragon. And the dragon's hoard was completely encased in ice beneath their feet. They'd been battling on its hoard the whole time, and they couldn't get through it. Because dragon cold, dragon ice isn't like regular ice. It's a lot denser.
Yep.
So they got to manage to get a couple of little things out, but they couldn't get the horde out. I'm not going to give a bunch of 9th level characters an adult dragon horde. Are you kidding? But yeah, so anyway, I got a hoot out of that. But that's what you got to do. You have to, that was a long-winded way of saying, you have to change it up.
Yeah.
If they have ready access to the books, or they have ready access in their mind, having played it a bunch of times, you got to throw something at them that they've never seen before, which is sort of the beauty of making your own world, because you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But the truth is, even if you're playing in Forgotten Realms, you can do whatever you want in that too. It doesn't matter.
Sure. If you're going to create your own areas in the world.
Right. Well, I mean, even if you're, if you have a green dragon storm into Shadowdale, maybe your dragons aren't like the dragons in the book, in your Forgotten Realms.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're the DM. What you say goes. So, but that would be a quick tip for new DMs out there who are like, well, what if they know how to do it, or what if they keep looking it up? Then don't use what's there. Make your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the other things I found that I always thought was a bit of a no-brainer, but it seems to take players by surprise, is take standard monsters, but put them inside armor. And so all they can see is the armor, and they have no idea what's inside the armor. Anything that's a bipedal humanoid creature, throw it inside armor. Let that Minotaur be in full plate.
Yep.
And so they see the horns and a creature in full plate. They don't know if it's a Minotaur. They don't know if it's a demon or a devil. It could be some tiefling on a rampage. They don't know.
Right.
And that's so simple.
Could be a bunch of kobolds that are stacked up on each other.
Work the arms. Work the arms. Left foot. Step forward. No, left foot. Yeah. Yeah.
Mercy is brilliant.
Yeah, boy, that was funny.
Yes.
Now, here's a real basic question for you because I was thinking about this. Um, when you write out maps, are you a graph paper or a hex paper person?
Are you talking about before technology
Yes.
existed?
Yes.
Okay. I was graph paper.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was too. I remember way back in the beginning, when Gamma World first came out. Gamma World operated on hex maps.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really my introduction to, hex paper, and I can still see it from time to time. Like the mapping program that I use, you can actually throw up a hex overlay on it and save it out that way. And I've done that for like the Roll20 maps for like overland
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Right.
to just basically say, you can cover a hex in a day.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it real easy to track, where your players are. Um, but for the most part, I'm graph paper too. That's the
Now,
one drawing based skill that I have, is if it's geometric shapes, I'm awesome. But if you ask me to draw anything freehand, I can't even do a legitimate circle freehand. You know,
circles aren't that easy to do freehand, but
yeah.
yeah.
I have two brothers who are exceptional at drawing things.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly someone in the family got that, but it wasn't this one.
Um, so I'll say this too, depending on your game that you're playing or the genre you're playing can differ how you set up uh, your campaigns and stuff. Because I know with villains and vigilantes, I had a somewhat different approach to coming up with adventures for that. One thing I've always been really good at is improv,
Mm-hmm.
just coming up with something on the fly and adapting to what the players are doing and making the story from that.
Sure.
So I use that skill quite a bit in villains and vigilantes. But one thing I did try to do is I tried to be the villain. What is the villain going to do?
Right.
What are they trying to accomplish? What goal are they trying to achieve? And what are they doing to go about getting that and achieving that goal? And so I map out the mission from that point of view, because I don't have to worry about the players. The players will have to do whatever they have to do to
Right.
thwart it. But I know what the villains are trying to do. And I know what steps they've already taken, and I know what steps they're going to take to get to whatever end game they're trying to get to. And then it's up to the players to figure it out, And I call on those improvisational skills for their investigation. What do they find out? What's happening? What do they hear about? That kind of thing. And then they kind of follow the breadcrumbs I lay down, and all of a sudden you've got a whole adventure there.
Sure. I'll admit something right now. If you remember back a few episodes when you were just fresh out of Costed's Wave and you camped at the crossroads, everything
Yep.
that happened at the crossroads I made up on the spot.
Cool.
Because I hadn't really thought about it until that point, and I was like, oh, crossroads. This is probably where other travelers would be camping for the night too, because it's a good sort of main resting stop. And Orman and Aaron and what's his son's name? I can't remember. Or Osman and
Sorry, I had to switch things here. Internets.
oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't remember. But the
But
two,
yeah, but look what it turned into though. Yeah, you improved it and it turned into this whole
Oh yeah,
cool
Os-
RP.
Osman and Aaron.
Yep.
Yeah, they came out of my brain right at that moment, and it was kind of like, oh, yeah, Dad and his son headed off basically to college, but
Yep.
college happens to be the towers at Azenor.
Right.
You know.
And it turned into a pretty fun RP session for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, so yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. I rely on the fact that I have an overactive imagination,
hmm
and I find it helpful what you were talking about with the villains, to remember that the villain's the hero of his story.
right.
The villain is out to accomplish something that he feels is very, very important.
hmm
There was one campaign that I wrote not too long ago, probably in the last 5 years or so, that was higher level, and it had to do with a high level evil enchanter, and it all came from reading a meme on some social media. I think it was Facebook. That was basically like, okay, it takes this much iron to make a sword. There is this much iron in a human body in the blood. So how
hmm
many people do you have to kill to make a sword? And I immediately went, huh. Yeah, there you go. This guy is laying waste to towns and villages simply so he can siphon off enough blood to make evil blood iron weapons.
I like that.
Yeah. And, that was his goal. He was like, okay, where's a little village where, they're really not going to be missed, at least not for a few days? And how many people are in it? 100? Great. I can get a sword out of that. Because I think I figured out it took like 83 people.
hmm
And he had developed spells that literally just pulled the iron out of people's blood, and then they expired because their blood was no longer viable.
And they were anemic. Yeah.
Yeah. And the pain of the iron leaving the body through the arteries and veins and muscle and skin,
Magneto.
yeah, usually killed them.
Yep.
But
Um,
yeah, I mean, and that was just, I read something on Facebook and went, I have a villain. And sometimes
hmm
it's just that simple.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had a student once, long time ago, ask me, I don't understand why we have to learn, stuff like English and history and algebra and stuff like that. And he was a student going into broadcasting, and I said, think about this. What happens if one day you get the assignment to go interview a famous mathematician, and you never really engaged with higher level math at all, beyond addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division? You never did really anything else. How are you possibly going to do your job in that interview, which is to translate what this person is saying into something anybody can understand? But if you've taken algebra or geometry or calculus or however far you make it through that, it at least gives you a baseline knowledge that you can then apply to that interview, and you'll be able to do your job. You'll be able to say, okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is, and then put it in plain person speak for your audience. And he was like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And that's pretty much my advice for anybody who's thinking about writing adventures is you can get inspiration from anything.
Yes.
You just have to keep your eye out. And if something strikes you as interesting, stop for a second and think about, is this something I could incorporate into something that I'm planning on doing?
Um, So a little anecdote that will describe my point of view on what you just talked about was in art history class in college, and the professor was talking about Michelangelo, and you know how not only how good he was, but he worked exclusively for the church, which meant he was very well off. And one of the students raised their hand and asked, how did those Renaissance artists get to be so good at what they did? And I flippantly retorted and said, they didn't have to take gen eds. My professor got a kick out of that.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. But yeah, it's always seemed to me that, you can get ideas from anything. And if you've got a good group of players, all you have to do is really be actively listening to what they do and say, and they're going to give you ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the things that I'm currently working on, we've already delved into Ahriman and Zorith's backstory some. We've delved into Arabelle's backstory some. But we haven't done anything with Tasha's backstory yet.
Right.
And that's because Annette joined us after we got started, so she never really fleshed out her background beyond, doing the background in the game. So I said, permission to write something.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, sure, go ahead. So I now have her full backstory.
Very cool.
And I am currently writing a hook that is going to play directly into that backstory.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I look forward to moving a little deeper in each of our storylines.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I've already seen in my head where at least a couple of them are going to intersect because they're already headed towards an intersection.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So.
The villains and vigilantes method, I also use that method for vampire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is a very role play heavy, always has been a role play heavy game.
Yeah. Well, from its inception, it was called the Storyteller system.
Well, and the game master is called the Storyteller.
Yeah.
So, you have to do that if you want to build a story. To create the antagonists, because in that it's more the antagonists, they're not necessarily villains.
Right.
But you definitely have rivals.
Yes.
You have to come up with, okay, well, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? What are they trying to get? What are they trying to accomplish? And, every clan, of course, has their own agenda and will utilize any advantage they can and exploit any weakness they can to get it. So then the players have to riff off of that. They have to play off of that. Okay, this is what they're doing, huh? All right. Or what are they doing? What are they up to? Let's find out, and that's the kind of stuff, that's how you approach that kind of a game. Even if it's a D&D game, if it's really role play or story driven, try to think of the bad guys. Think of what are they trying to do? What are they trying to get? And your players will bite that every single time. They'll go after it.
Yeah, and you also have to think, what are they doing and why would the players oppose them? Sometimes it's obvious.
Right.
They're trying to destroy the world. Okay, yeah, we're going to stop that.
Well, sure,
But
that's where I keep all my stuff.
you know, the mystery that uh, the four of you are pursuing in Thunder's Edge right now, the why is completely different. And if you were of a mind of, well, this is Thunder's Edge, it's a bunch of barbarians, let them sort it out themselves, that would actually make some sense. Had you not been sent there under the auspices that you were, if you had just kind of gotten there on your own and encountered this, Arabelle probably would have been, well, we absolutely have to try and see if we can help this poor man. But everybody else might have been, doesn't really affect us.
In Araman's case, it's simply a means to an end, because he's trying to find or expose, the
the rogue Jogravanan element.
Yeah. And so this definitely reeks of something like that. So he's following this lead. The other thing is they're trying to get into the inner
enclave,
enclave, and to do that they need trust. Well, what better way of gaining their trust than to exonerate one of their high yuppity yups?
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer for Araman. It's pretty cut and dry. He has his motivations. Keeping everybody else on that is proven exhausting, but we're working on it.
Right. But yeah, it's always been fun for me to try and come up with the full story about, especially if an adventure is based in a location.
Yeah.
I need to know, like, the history. I need to know from when this location was first created, what has happened there.
Yeah.
I have to have that in my head so I can see the progression before I can then say, okay, it started here, we're here, so here's what it's like now. I have to know how it got there, or I can't do it justice. So writing a location is always a little bit more involved for me, because I actually have to sit down and figure out, okay, what was the history of this?
Right. I'm going to shift a little bit, but in the same vein of what we're talking about here. Any of you out there who are players, let me give you a little piece of advice. If you really want to be a part of this world and it be immersive, here's a suggestion for you. Take what the game master has put in front of you and find something in it that your character can relate to and actively move in that direction. I've done that a couple of times in this adventure, and part of it has been to kind of help you move the story along. But it has turned into moments for Araman for character development things I never thought of when I first made the character. All of a sudden, now I have, because of following those little nuggets, has turned into character changing, realities for him. Which one I'm sure you can understand is Tassa.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, Araman's not going to really give two flips about this guy with this big fancy, voilas. So he's going to blow him off. But then, you said the elf lady came in and she's elderly.
Yeah.
Something about that, I'm like, oh, you know what? I know what I can do here. And I knew you sort of wanted us to go into this camp and, interact with some of those people. And so I thought, okay, this will be a good way to get it in there. He's interested in this lady. because she's elderly and she's been around a long time. She's an elderly elf.
Yeah, she's
She's
over
seen it.
400 years old.
Yeah, she's seen it all. She's been there. So he he decided to follow her, and I decided to follow her because to help you move the story along.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, that's enough for the character to kind of hook into and pull him along. But then it turned into this thing, and turned into a motivation for Ahriman to try to reclaim his land, his nation. You know, so now he has this big, you know, ultimate goal that he's trying to accomplish, this motivation to keep going, aside from survival, because before that's all it was, just trying to survive. You know, now he has some aspirations because of that one little thing that I thought, well, let's keep the story moving along and just follow this elven lady. And that's what I'm talking about. You never know what's going to happen when you do stuff like that. Bite on what the game master puts in front of you. Follow it. See what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because the game master might inspire him to come up with something specific for your character. You know, so that's my big 25-cent advice to anyone.
Now, I want to ask, I mentioned this at the very beginning. As I've gone through the years and you know, hopefully gotten better at writing stuff, I've also run across a couple things that I simply cannot do to save my life. And the big one is I still, at this point, have absolutely no sense of how long something's going to take.
Yeah.
If you,
Well,
you know, and that's why I'm absolute shit at running games for conventions that I write, because, you know, I have like a 4-hour time period and I write something that I think should be 4 hours long, and we don't even get a third the way through it in 4 hours.
right.
You know.
Well, here's a sort of the way I kind of cope with something like that if I'm on a time schedule is first of all, how many you're playing.
Right.
The more you have, the slower it's going to be. So you got to kind of account for that. The other thing, and this is a big thing for game masters too, especially narrative game masters, is you have to be able to put things into beats. You have to be able to, you know, pace it. Pacing is everything in a game. You have to have a little bit of something for everybody, and it has to come at fairly regular intervals.
Yep.
So you have to keep things moving along. Don't let yourself get bogged down with rules. If you don't know what the rule is, make one up right there and say, this is what we're doing for now.
Session rule.
And yeah, and keep your players moving. You know, if you don't know what the spell is, then think of something else to do. But we need to go right now. It needs to keep moving along.
Right.
But you also, at the same time, and this is where the balance comes in, you have to give your players an opportunity to do what they want to do.
Sure.
You know, don't rush them along and say, come on, we got to get to the next one. Let's go. Because they kind of got to, you know, they got to be able to do their thing and have their moment. But yeah, pacing is a lot of it. That helps with time management somewhat. Now, as far as making an adventure, okay, this one's going to be 4 hours, no more. It's not an exact science. I don't know if anyone, you know,
That's
you kind of
that's what
keep your eye
Bakeaholic
on the
said to me.
clock.
Bakeaholic,
Yeah.
I mentioned this to her, and she said, how the hell are you supposed to know how long something's going to take? You don't know what anybody else is going to do.
Exactly. And, you know, you keep your eye on the clock and you're like, okay, we kind of need to be here at this point in time. So you can either omit certain things, go, you know, as you go along. You can if they're in a particularly nasty encounter that's taking a while, okay, so he's not going to be quite as tough, so they can get on with it and keep going.
Right.
There's things you can do to shave time off if it looks like it's going past. Sometimes you get to a point and you're like, oh, we are way ahead of schedule. This ain't going to last the whole time. And, that's easy enough to do. You just throw something tougher and
Yeah,
meaner
that's where the improv skills come in handy.
Right. Right.
You just think of something and add an extra chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything that you've found that you wish you were better at?
Yeah. I always, I always think I can improve on my environmental descriptors. Trying to make people feel like they're in the space and doing it using creative language rather than just the facts. Okay, here's where you are, boom, boom, boom. This
Right.
is what it looks like. Here's what you need to do. I would love to be able to do that better. That's, I'm a little weak on that. Now, where I am good at stuff like that is in combat, describing what happens during combat as a result of an action. Like in Villains and Vigilantes. The impact comes from your super strong character who just punched a car, and I'm good at talking about the damage the car took and how many feet back it flew and what kind of damage it did collaterally and this and that. I'm good at that crap. But in terms of setting a story or setting a stage of, and making the person feel like his character is in this environment, I'd like to be better at that.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of the opposite of that. I think I do okay in setting a feeling in a particular environment. Like, last night describing, what it was like opening that inner door
Yeah.
to the house.
Right.
But I don't do so well with the in combat descriptions.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I really am impressed by Matt Mercer.
Yes.
Because he's really good at that.
Right.
And,
Yep.
that's something I strive to be better at.
Yeah, it's that I think a lot of that goes back to your old gameplay routines where okay, I rolled a 19. Yep, you hit him. Roll damage.
Right.
Okay, I did 8 points of damage. Okay,
Right.
scratch it off. He's hurting. And you just keep things moving that way instead of okay, rolled a hit. I rolled a 19. All right, you watch as your sword blade slices right beneath the armor and into his midsection, and blood goes flying, and he stumbles back slightly, holding his wound, and growls, grits his teeth, and is coming at you now.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a more logical thing to do.
Yeah.
In terms of describing it.
Yeah. One of the authors that I've read that I've been really, really impressed with is R.A. Salvatore.
Mm-hmm.
When, you get like the epic fights between Drizzt and Artemis. And, so you've got two absolute masters of the blade going at each other. He writes, I can watch that like it's descriptions of choreography.
Yep.
I could see that whole fight take place in my head and know exactly what it looks like, because he's really, really good at describing that stuff.
Right.
So
Stephen King is good at that too, but
yes.
The issue with Stephen King, he'll spend an entire chapter just describing a character.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of got to plow through all of that stuff, but it pays off at the end of the book because now you're invested in this person.
Right.
You know this person.
Right.
You know. So when something happens to them, it generates emotion, and so you get it. You understand why he does those things.
Yeah. One of my absolute longtime favorite authors is Stephen Donaldson, and he absolutely loves to do environmental descriptions. But he wrote a world where practically every person in it has an almost Native American level reverence for the world itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing that, you then fall in love with the land, just like the people who live there. And then when terrible things happen to the world, you empathize with the plight of the characters having to deal with it too, because you're like, I can't believe, how are they going to fix this? The forest is gone. How are they going to fix that? Oh my God.
Right. Yep.
And it's kind of that same thing. Sometimes it's a little torturous to plow through, but then he's very good at painting a very detailed picture in your head. So you can imagine the scene in which that particular conflict or conversation or whatever is taking place.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, hopefully you've got some new ideas on how to put together your adventures.
Mm-hmm. We, of course, are still learning.
Yep. We will never stop learning.
But that's part of the fun.
Yep. And it's not just learning new rules either. Although, the new rules sometimes dictate a modification of the creation process.
Yep.
But yeah. It's fun to just kind of, live in a place in your head for a little bit and then actually get it out in some sort of physical form that you can then share with other people.
Right. Yep.
When you see your players kind of reacting with awe to the thing that you thought was really cool, that's very humbling and very satisfying.
Yes, it is. It's very satisfying.
So.
Well, the clock on the clubhouse wall says we're up.
Yep. So that's it for our programming for this week. We'll be starting up again on Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern U.S. time for Board Remotely.
I don't know what they got planned.
No, they. I remember last night, both Nikki and Pam saying that they weren't completely sure what they were going to do, but something fun. They always do something fun. And then Monday night, player chat. Tuesday night, we'll be back for episode 16 of Lands of Akathan. We'll be at the end of our 4th month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then we will be back a week from tonight. We have something kind of special in mind. It includes a guest or two, so we have to check and see if they're going to be available. But if they are, it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, it'll be really good. You won't want to miss it because they will have plenty of interesting things to say for sure.
Yes, they will. So stay safe, stay sane. If you like what you see, either on Twitch or on YouTube, we'd love a follow or a subscribe, depending on which platform you're on. And if you've got questions or comments about something that we said in any of these programs, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we're starting to get a presence on Liker, which is kind of a new alternative to Facebook.
We do have a Discord too, by the way.
Yes, we do actually have our own Discord. And if you're interested in participating in that, Again, you can get there from our website. You can get to all of these things from our website, which is artifactsworldwide.com. So,
Yep. So
hopefully,
come check in on us.
yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you think, especially if there's topics you'd like us to talk about on this show. You know, topics you're like, this is something I'm struggling with. How do you guys deal with it?
Right.
We're happy to try and help.
Sure.
You know, that's one of the things about, you know, I'm a teacher, so I instinctively want to help people learn stuff. It's just that's kind of what I do. So, you know, if you have questions, if you're stuck, if you just need some more ideas, you kind of run out of ideas, or you thought partway through something, but then you hit a block and you're like, I don't know where to go from here. Yeah, we are more than happy to help. Just let us know.
Yep. It'd be fun for us to do stuff like that. So
Absolutely. So, that's it. We will be back next Wednesday night. Again, stay safe, stay sane, wear your mask, and make sure you vote. Kind of
Please.
important.
A little bit.
We are the evening after the first presidential debate. Please
Such
vote.
as it is.
Please vote.
Yes.
We're not saying who for,
Yes.
just please vote. This is a time to be an active participant in our democracy.
More than ever.
Yep. All right. We will see you all next week for more GM Chat. Until then, have a good week. Good night, everybody.
See ya.